Hello and welcome to this 49th episode of the Denver Homes Market Report. This is Ricky Schoonover of Mode Denver Real Estate. Last week, we continued our conversation surrounding a few of the top sticking points here in today's Denver real estate market. The low interest rates clearly were not going to stay in that sub 3% range for too terribly long. Then, of course, the issue of such low inventory as compared to what the demand is at the moment. If you live here in the Denver metro area, you may feel like this is a specific issue to us here in the area. However, I have family in San Diego, my cousin sells real estate out there, then I have my nephew living in North Carolina, and although he does not sell real estate, him and his family are preparing to buy their first home, and he is also reporting back to me the historic low number of homes to choose from, rising prices, and crazy multiple offers in just days on some homes. Then, of course, my real estate friends in Charleston, South Carolina, and they too are expressing their concerns that there is just not enough houses currently coming up for sale to meet the demands of those seeking to buy a home. So yes, the real estate market in Denver is tight when it comes to homes coming to market. But we are by no means alone in this seller's market environment. It is across the nation. There is a pendulum that tends to swing back and forth as interest rates continue to rise. You'll see sellers who start to see the market softening a bit, and the market will likely swing in a buyer's direction, at least a little bit at some point. The challenge there becomes the interest rates. As the rates rise and you start seeing the home prices stabilize or even maybe come down slightly, that looks great. However, if you wait too long, any stabilization or softening of the purchase price can easily be more than offset by higher interest rates and the costs associated with interest in regards to your monthly payment. So when I start to hear my buyer clients say things like, well, the market is just too hot, I'm going to wait until the prices come down, I try my hardest to point out to the few times in my lifetime where the housing market has made a correction. The reason the market makes a correction is often due to an economic shift and an even larger shift in the bank's policy when it comes to lending money. Mainly, people who can take advantage of the market when there's a downward spiral are those who somehow still have a secure job and enough cash in their account, and their life beyond the crisis of the day is feeling stable enough that they can use their large volume of cash to buy properties from distressed homeowners who are not financially secure and need to sell their homes so they can free up the equity before the market falls to a point like back there in 2008 through 2011 timeframe, where many people were upside down on their homes and they owed the bank more money than their home was worth at that time. I was one of those, actually. I dedicated a podcast to my experience back in the early 2000s and all the way up into the mortgage and housing crisis of 2008 and beyond. I was one of the lucky ones, though. I had support. I found good renters, and I downsized my life big time. I was able to hold on by a shoelace through that last financial crisis, and finally came out on the other side when it was around 2012. I was finally able to sell those properties, and not only was I no longer upside down, I even managed to make a profit. But my initial plan was to only hold on to those properties, and there was actually 3 of them. I was only going to hold on to them for about 3 to 5 years. But I had to weather the storm, and I held on to them for around 10 years before the values came back, where I was actually able to sell them. So the moral of the story is, buying real estate is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Do we have periods of expansive growth where people are making money on their homes? Sure, it definitely happens. Then there are those times of retraction in the economy where only those with substantial amounts of money are really able to take advantage of those opportunities, where other homeowners are forced to cash out, or even worse, they find themselves in denial, or they get caught off guard of the downward spiral. Maybe they thought their job was secure, and one day, like my father, they show up on a Friday to pick up their paycheck, and the boss tells them, "Sorry, we don't have enough business coming in, and we won't be needing you until further notice." And at that point, there's no clue of when things might turn around. In my parents' case, they never actually owned a home. We always rented places and bounced around throughout my entire life. In fact, I never lived in a home which my family actually owned while I was growing up. I bought my first little 500 square foot, one-bedroom condo when I was about 30 years old. Actually, I think by the time closing came around, I was turning 31. So when I was younger and my dad lost his job, we didn't have any savings or a house with any equity that we could cash out and weather the storm. We basically went from surviving paycheck to paycheck to crisis mode in a pretty short order. It wasn't like we were in some, opulent rental and we could simply downsize to something a bit less comfortable. We spent most of my childhood not too many steps from homelessness. We were lucky in that we had family who stepped in more than once to help us out. I remember living with my uncle for a while when I was around 8 years old. Then I remember living with my older brother up on the Indian reservation when I was 14. And then after buying my first condo at age 30, things from there started getting much better financially for me. Even then, surviving the worst mortgage and housing meltdown since the Great Depression and coming out okay on the other side of that, I learned a few things. And one of those lessons is if you own real estate and you were lucky enough to build up some equity, and then being proactive, you can better survive a financial crisis. In fact, my sister and I saved our parents. We had bought them a house to retire in. They had substantially downsized their lives just before the financial crisis of 2008 had hit. They too did better at surviving that crisis of 2008. Now, sadly, I lost my father to a massive heart attack in late 2009, and my mother just a couple of years later. They had no money when they passed, but they were in a home that they had paid just enough to cover the mortgage, and they had a safe and secure place to live during that time. If we were not in the position to buy them a home back in around 2003, I honestly do not know how comfortable their final days would have been. My guess is, since my sister has 4 bedrooms in her home, they would have had to move in with her family. I was seriously impacted, and I moved with my then boyfriend, and we shared a 340 square foot studio in Boston. So I would not have had anywhere for them to go or stay with us. The fact that we had bought them the house, even though through the crisis it was only worth about half of what we paid for it. As long as between myself, my parents, and my sister, we could keep the mortgage paid, they had a secure place to live, and it took all of us working together to make that happen for them. If I'm being honest, I came very close to having to declare bankruptcy. And one of the main reasons I did not was my fear of what would happen to the home and mine and my sister's name, which was in mine and my sister's name. And my parents were living there. See, my parents had stepped in to help one of our cousins who had 3 kids and was way too young and just wasn't able to take care of them. My parents took in all 3 children. So there was much pressure on me to make sure I kept them in their secure home. Okay, now I know I got off on a little bit of a personal story here, but it's an important conversation to have. Real estate can be such an amazing financial tool when it's used correctly. Of course, like anything, you can overindulge or overextend like I did back in the mid-2000s, and things can get downright scary if you find yourself struggling to stay afloat. So take my life lessons to heart so that you'll hopefully never have to go through that situation. I have never declared bankruptcy, and even the thought of that idea was uncomfortable, to say the least. So keep this thought in mind. If you look throughout history here in the U.S., you would be hard-pressed to find a time, even in our last 100 years, where if you were to buy real estate and you were able to hold on to that property for at least 10 years, even during the Great Depression, if you were able to hold on to your property, keep your payments up, and in a 10-year period, the value went up from where you bought it. Now, there may be some rural areas where that theory doesn't hold up, but looking at pretty much any metro area in America, if you buy and were able to hold on to that real estate for at least 10 years, at the end of that 10 years, you likely will have made some profit over what you paid for it 10 years prior. Even for me, where I bought and then the market crashed, in a 10-year span, it came back and I still made money, even buying and even overextending myself through the worst housing crisis since the Great Depression. You know, my father being a cabinet maker by trade, I love using the analogy of a hammer being an amazing tool. You know, you can use it to help you build a house, or if used improperly, can cause you serious harm. Real estate is also an amazing tool, but like a hammer, you need to use it correctly. They don't teach this stuff in school. I mentioned earlier my nephew in North Carolina. He is a super smart guy, but there are so many aspects to mortgages and real estate that nobody really teaches you. I guess that's why real estate professionals, even with all the modern technology, we have at our fingertips, your experienced realtor and local lender partner are some of the best allies you can get into your corner early in the process to help guide you through what is likely one of the largest and most consequential investments of your life. Having a good realtor and a mortgage broker on your side early on in the process is going to save you time, money, and stress. Realtors and mortgage brokers only make money when they actually help you close the deal. There are no penalties or additionally hourly costs or anything. So call me, even when you're in the early stage of planning. I can point out all sorts of tips and tricks based on your situation, which will help you along the way in the process. I can also get you connected to any number of professionals. If you're getting your home ready for sale, maybe you just don't have time to paint that room, or a sprinkler head is broken out in the yard. Things like that, which you've been meaning to get to, but you just can't seem to find the time. So you keep putting it off. You keep putting your house on the market. And this is what I do. Whether you are a buyer or a seller, I help my clients unstick the sticking points so your plans are not put on hold and you can move forward. Okay, well, that's going to be a wrap for today's show. I hope you enjoyed listening to my little personal story. It just came to me as I'd been working with my nephew and trying to help him navigate this process of buying his first home. And like I said, he's a smart guy, but there are so many little things that I have been pointing out to him and making sure that he's thinking ahead. They don't teach you how to buy a home in school. There are so many aspects about the purchase contract that you need to know in order to protect yourself and All that goes for buyers and sellers. So take my advice. Connect with a realtor you trust and lean on them to help you throughout the process. If you have any questions, you can always call me. The call is free. There's no obligation. 720-688-5110. This is once again Ricky Schoonover, Mode Denver Real Estate, and you are listening to the Denver Homes Market Report.